I could open this video with a bunch of flowery talk about how the world is harsh and cruel in different ways to almost everyone, but a certainty of life always, that we must suffer to know we exist, but I've done that a lot recently, and in fact that is what I originally had written down for this video as well. But I don't need to tell you all of that. You all have the capacity to think back on how this world has wronged you and when and why and where. What I'm interested in instead is how we respond to being wrong in that way. When someone steals from us, hurts us, or the people we care for, what is our reaction and why? Is there one reaction which is the moral response to cruelty? And is that a premise which, if we all follow, will realistically lead to a kinder world? I'll be making seemingly definite statements as we go along, but keep in mind these are things I've analyzed from the story we'll be covering. The point of this isn't to say what is exactly right at all times, but to explore what possibly could be. And of course, my own beliefs will be bleeding into what I've analyzed, but I will address my own take on them at the end, because I do disagree somewhat with one of my favorite stories on this topic. How do we respond to, and hopefully fix, a cruel world? This is the conflict at the center of the 98 anime Trigun, which takes place on a world called No Man's Land, stressed for its harshness if the name wasn't a dead giveaway. It's an arid desert planet where small towns only survive due to plants, biogenerators remaining from the human seed ships which crash landed on the planet so many years ago, holding the remains of humanity in cryosleep to find a better world. Clearly the journey ended early and they are forever bound to what they called No Man's Land due to this lack of knowledge about technology like plants. They can be maintained, but as of yet never created new, and surviving without one is nearly possible. As such, it's a world aptly described as dog eat dog. Raiders rob train cars, water is hoarded, arable land is fought over, families cross the desert starving, and it seems there's little salvation to be found. The first episode included the quite direct phrase,
I guess we had a miracle here, without God's help.
showcasing a world too cruel even for faith. We see plenty of evidence for how this affects the citizens. Most of the episodes are singular stories revolving around a response to evil. Episode 3, Peacemaker is a master gunsmith quitting the trade and spending his days doing nothing but drinking as a moral stance. A set of guns he made for people to protect themselves against this world were instead used in a bank robbery that killed his family, inadvertently making him an aid to the cruelty plaguing them all. He determines that the only moral stance is to do nothing, since good intent was so easily corrupted. Episode 4, Love and Peace, is a revenge story. It's a man taking retribution against the vicious butcher who killed his family long ago by now taking the latter's daughter hostage in the hopes of drawing him out for a duel. Despite this man now being a beloved father himself, he wants blood for blood. His response is to be equal to that which wronged him. Episode 5, Hard Puncher, is a whole town turning on our hero Vash the Stampede, who traverses this world solving the problems he comes across. Having just done the same for this town without any bloodshed, they turn on him, hoping to cash in on the $60 billion double-dollar reward he carries, being a legendary outlaw supposedly responsible for the destruction of entire cities. They love him and his bright personality, especially the kids who he encourages and protects, but their plant is malfunctioning. Without fixing it, the entire town would be left to die in the wasteland. To protect their kids, they have to kill their new favorite person. Their response to harshness is not to repeat it out of desire, but to repeat it out of necessity. Survival comes at a cost. Many episodes have something like this. There are entire sand steamers set to die for profit, a son who wants his family to give up their arable land so they're not killed for it instead, a man forced to train in isolation for 20 years to become a killing machine, starving families crossing deserts, all in some way a cycle of cruelty. A good man removing his use, an eye for an eye, stealing from those who stole, whether directly or not, they all in some way are both a reaction to a cruel world and the reason it will continue to be so. This is the premise everything is built from in the series. While each episode has a minor theme that's narrated directly to us, they still serve as the backdrop for one being developed in Vash the Stampede, our main character. His response to everything is instead kindness. Despite being a legendary gunslinger supposedly responsible for the destruction of entire cities, he actually hates conflict and refuses to take a life or even let others do so in his presence. Every minor story we mention sees the same brand of ending, the one Vash chooses. The gunsmith learns through Vash that sitting idle only means he's aiding evil by not putting any good actions into circulation. Sure, some will end in cruelty, but each one is the potential for good. If we all stopped trying, there wouldn't even be potential. The man seeking revenge gets his duel, but spares his opponent with a non-lethal wound. To kill him would only serve to make another child left behind like he was and lead to the cycle continuing again. The town which turns on Vash is inevitably saved by him once again from a pair of criminals holding their own bounty, as turning them in provides the money they needed. Despite their betrayal, Vash gives it to them just like that, because leaving them in their necessity would only mean they all slowly die, or they'd have to try desperate means once again. The sand steamer is saved by redemptive action. The killing machine is allowed the freedom he was meant to kill for so he didn't have to. Starving families are given food to make it through. The response which leads to an ideal outcome is always forgiveness or positivity or understanding. In short, it's always kindness. Despite being wronged himself or witnessing those who were and the ones who perpetrated it alike, Vash only ever takes the third option, the trope for finding the ideal outcome in a terrible binary situation. Where it seems the only answers provided are death or sadness, he finds another way in generosity. And in many of those, this works exactly because the other options were cyclical. Do nothing and let evil happen, get revenge and leave someone wanting revenge, leave a town which tried to kill you needing to kill someone else. We see that one of the main reasons harshness persists is because it is committed by both those with good and bad intent. It feels necessary. It feels like the world runs on cruelty, and if we don't as well, will simply be the cost for it all. The world is inherently bad, right? Vash's mentality would instead be that the world is not inherently cruel. After all, if everyone ceased to do cruel things, then one day there would be both no need and no desire for them to occur, correct? We see this in how even the villains have reasons for their destructive actions, whether it's mental torture, past injustice which forced them to harden their soul, or what we can interpret as a world which taught them to take is to survive. And of course, there's much more of this across No Man's Land as well. Episode 2 makes clear that thirst and starvation are due in part to the hoarding of natural resources for wealth. The vicious butcher in episode 4 killed the people he did so he could have land to grow on and become wealthy from. And the quick draw contest of episode 10 has innocent families being held hostage for financial gain. What's driving this cruelty is greed and other negative desires, yes, but what's driving those is a limitation which states such things are the only way to be happy. Evil forming evil. There is a root, and that root seems to lie outside of mankind. If we were to wait it out, would evil end? Can we fix a world which is broken around us? Vash chooses kindness because of this. Kindness is the only response which won't perpetuate the cycle of a broken world. However, this isn't the only perspective displayed in the show, and for good reason. As many of us know, it's not always realistic to be kind in every situation, something even Vash almost falls to in episode 12. Seeing his foe slaughter innocent civilians despite Vash being his only target, the humanoid typhoon gets the most enraged of the entire series, even saying to his enemy,
"Now you are also going to die!"
before remembering the words of Rem, the woman who inspired him to always be kind, and backing down. As he does, he makes one short, simple statement which sums this all up.
This is all I can do.
Even he knows how painful kindness can be, but it's all that can be done to root out evil. Everything else continues the cycle. As such, we see his thematic counterpart, Nicholas D. Wolfwood, a traveling priest who doesn't actually hold much faith. Despite his profession, he's not someone interested in getting to the root of evil, but instead making a world which is comfortable for those free of it. He's essentially a gun for hire, using the money raised from his escapades to fund an orphanage he runs back home. It's quite a clear statement. Inflict punishment on the wicked, literally with his weapon being named the Cross Punisher, and use the spoils of doing so to provide for the innocent. He responds to harshness, like the conditions which create orphans, with a harshness of his own, directing it against those who could be argued to deserve it. This methodology is one which assumes sacrifice. The root of evil is inherent to man, and as such something will always need to be sacrificed for good. All we can do is make the outcome the least evil. Wolfwood's time is much more limited than Vash's, so we have to zoom in on singular examples rather than the whole story, and his best is in episode 11, Escape from Pain. The premise is our heroes traveling with a trading caravan en route to an exclusive city, a pass is required to enter, and without that contract, the caravan would have no funds to continue. While in the caravan, they encounter Julius and Moore, a young couple seeking to escape the caravan as it somewhat secretly deals in human lives, with Moore being the most current toll. Wolfwood takes part in helping them escape. However, upon doing so, he learns Julius is actually the pass, with a large tattoo on his arm. If he leaves, the caravan can't enter the town, can't trade and restock, and would die out in the wasteland slowly and painfully. Whether Julius and Moore escape or not, there will be suffering. However, only one pair is immediately hurt if they return, while the certain death of what could be near 100 people occurs if they leave. To him, the right and wrong of the situation are clear. Wolfwood attempts to teach them this fact and stop them, however, they refuse, stating a caravan in town which deal in human life deserve to die out anyway. Of course, halting them would be cruel, but he argues that they would be directly responsible for all these deaths. Their actions would be even more cruel than what had been inflicted upon them. A sacrifice is necessary, there is no good option, so you take the least evil one. What feeds the cycle more, a woman sold off and an unhappy man, or 50 times more people dying? However, in classic Vash fashion, he creates a third option, fake killing the couple and threatening off the search party with his reputation as the legendary and ruthless outlaw. This leads to Julius and Moore escaping, and the caravan being allowed entrance to the city anyway because they could not be held responsible for the unstoppable humanoid typhoon killing their pass in cold blood, which there were multiple witnesses to. They sent him to get them back after all. They clearly tried all they could, even to the most desperate measures. Seeing that there was a better solution, Wolfwood remarks upon his departure,
"All along, I thought there had to be a sacrifice. But there was another answer after all."
Clearly, the anime is at least somewhat taking the side of its main character, which is the reasonable response. But something will happen to that fact as the series progresses. Wolfwood isn't there for the entire show, but does return after a short break, leading to an outright testing of his ideals against Vash's. This happens across 4 episodes, 22 through 25. The first of the 4, Alternative, sees the pair saving an independent orphanage from attacking sandworms, only for it to come to light that the worms are being controlled by one of the children, who is actually part of the Gung Ho Guns, a group of enemies sent to torment Vash. Although Vash disables his device for controlling them, he still holds the humanoid typhoon and the entire group of orphans at gunpoint, exactly because Vash refuses to shoot. He can raise his gun and shoot away the typhoons without fear. Our hero tries to talk him down, mentioning how it felt like he wasn't actually evil, but rather he was forcing himself to be so out of a flawed belief. That, like so many, cruelty bore his cruelty before, but he could change. However, resisting Vash's words, he seems ready to shoot, only to be shot himself by Wolfwood. Vash and the others react with horror, all believing wholeheartedly there was no way the Gung Ho gun would actually shoot, while Wolfwood remarks that if he had done nothing, Vash would be lying there dead instead. He makes a statement similar to Vash's when he was tested on his belief earlier, saying,
"What other alternative do I have if we're going to survive?"
It's a statement that doesn't just mirror Vash's, but also the sentiment of those they helped across the series. Just like them, he's only doing what he can, even if he wishes to help as many as Vash. But in saving one, do you risk losing even more? Say Wolfwood held back and Vash did die right here. Is that really just one life which was lost? Imagine all those minor stories without the humanoid typhoon's input. There'd be drunks watching their towns be robbed, a daughter without her beloved father, a whole city slowly dying as their plant ceased to function, 2 lovers dead in the sand as a caravan starved. Vash may have a sordid past, but it's undeniable we witness so much good coming from his being, a slow push back against the cycle. Doesn't protecting his life also protect many more? Isn't his survival the survival of many, the same as Wolfwood, who has an orphanage depending on his life? Yes, killing someone to play it safe is doing just that, deciding on the supposed lesser evil to be safe, to be simple, rather than risking the third option. We could argue it's selfish, a weak person taking the weak route because, as Trigun believes, there is always another way. But what's more selfish? Dealing with the pain of making the tough call for their good, or taking away the pain of others to feel better about yourself? Choosing the pain you can handle easier. Vash doesn't get to perform his good deeds for free, even when they do work. Wolfwood is never held up in bed resting off his injuries, but Vash is multiple times. In those wasted days where he can't do anything, Wolfwood could at least be out there trying. Maybe he won't lead to the third option, to the most ideal, picturesque, everything picture-perfect ending, but he can prevent the greatest evil still. Overall, both men are toiling endlessly to reach a better world. So are they really that different? They just find a different type of pain more bearable than the other. And even if Vash is seeking an end to all this cruelty while Wolfwood is just a constant pushing it to the side, how far off is that end Vash seeks? If it's thousands of years from now and the entire world could already be dead anyway, or the conditions could have changed even more to breed more cruelty, can we really consider that end good? Since it might never actually arrive, even if it is theoretically possible, there is always a cost. Taking it upon oneself does seem the moral option, of course. But when we consider all of this, isn't the cost to oneself a cost to others as well? How can we care for others without caring for ourselves? What good does a broken, beaten human do against evil? An episode after Wolfwood makes the tough call is Paradise, his last appearance in the anime. Here he faces off against Chapel the Evergreen, the man who turned him from a hopeful child into a trained killer. We see flashbacks of his past, how he was lured into killing evil men by evil men at such a young age, saving some but always leaving others in pain as he grew. Like Vash, Wolfwood is facing up to a past he dislikes, where the bearing of that cross came early. Every action he takes is under the guidance of its weight, an inescapable force determining his life. He believes his sins are already too heavy for him to see himself as the righteous man, and so he accepts being the Grey One. Someone will always have to kill, so it might as well be the one who's already tainted. This is the pain he takes, bearing sin for children like him to prevent more of him from ever occurring. He and Chapel face off, a fight which is all but certain to go to the death with this much bad blood and knives manipulation behind the scenes. However, having won and holding all the advantage over his foe, Wolfwood decides to spare his tormentor, approaching his foe with his gun dropped, a sign of pacifism which does end the battle. He did it, Vash's way, and it worked. Once again, he holds the realization there is always another way. But all isn't as it seems, as Chapel is manipulated by Legato Bluesummers, a psychic villain who can force the bodies of others to act. He makes Chapel raise his gun and fire, fatally wounding Wolfwood, who once again spares his foe. The priest makes his way to a local church after a conversation with Vash, somewhat revealing that he was contracted to bring Vash knives safely, another reason for his decision in alternative. His final words, however, are an apology to the god he never really believed in.
My sins are so heavy. Too heavy. Too heavy to ever atone for.
He admits to being the selfish man, the one taking the simple path at the expense of others. It's a statement of regret and complacency with evil as that weighty cross finally catches up with him. The quite literal metaphor for his sins is too heavy for him to stand up again given his injuries, and there he dies, wishing to live, but crushed down by his sins. There was always another way, and he failed. Vash is unquestionably right. Right? However, immediately after Paradise is Sin, the episode where Vash is finally able to face down the brutal Legato Bluesummers who has been torturing him across the latter half of the anime. It's not hard for Vash to get the upper hand, as Legato's goal isn't to kill or stop Vash, it's to inflict him with the greatest pain. Their confrontation comes with the same kind of manipulation the man has been known for, though, as appearing over the horizon are Meryl and Millie, Vash's companions, held hostage by a horde of brainwashed townsfolk. Legato gives Vash a choice: kill him and end the brainwashing, or allow his friends to die. Kill one to save two, the very ideal he and Wolfwood came to blows over. There's too many to disarm without killing them, and no way to escape with two bodies and Legato's powers acting on the situation. What is the third option? Vash hears conflicting memories while this plays out, Wolfwood's realism and Rem's idealism telling him to take different paths, but with the end imminent for two innocent people, Vash makes the call he never had before. "10 days later, Vash awakes from his injuries, still deep into the process of recovering. But the real damage isn't to his body, which can heal on its own, but his mind, which may never do so. He is tortured, believing himself to be just as bad as the story's true villain, his brother Knives, who sent all of these villains after Vash to cause him the most pain possible. The man who crashed the siege ships and doomed humanity to constant pain. Meryl and Millie work around town to support them, and Vash wonders, Maybe giving up the life he led just to stay here with them is what he should do. But as he's recovering, a passing trucker recognizes the injured man as Vash the Stampede, and they drag him out into the desert to torture and likely kill him, stating firmly that they deserve the right to do so for all he's done, to do this against the man who did destroy cities, but is also blamed for anything and everything alike. At an all-time low, Vash accepts the punishment. Even when they begin to believe maybe he's the wrong man, he states no, he is the vicious criminal. He deserves this. Coming to his rescue are Meryl and Millie, the former stepping between the gunman and Vash, claiming that revenge will do nothing, all life is valuable, and everyone deserves a future. What good would killing this broken man do anyway? What would be the point but to leave her and Millie saddened? To make a world with more pain?
It's up to us to end the cycle of hatred. If we don't work to end the sorrow this time, then the cycle of pain will just continue on.
She succeeds, drawing on the conflict in the man's heart and getting him to drop his gun and leave. Despite his pain, he was good at heart. Reminded of his first inspiration Rem, who uttered such similar words, Vash is revitalized, understanding once more that there is always a path forward. As he says,
"Even if a mistake is made, as long as a person realizes their mistake, it's possible to make it right again."
And this line is, I think, where it all really comes together. The real tragedy of the pairing between Vash and Wolfwood is that neither was really wrong. Yes, Wolfwood dies believing he was, but Vash was forced to show the opposite the very next episode. And our priest was correct in fearing the risk associated with our main character's methods. He tried them once, one single time to replicate them, and he paid the ultimate price for it. There was another way, yes, but there was always a cost, and the cost was on him to the bitter end, all just for the life of a villain. What happens to those orphans in Wolfwood's absence? What dries Millie's tears at the loss of someone she loved? What about all the good he did and would do, even if he sometimes knew evil was necessary? How do we weigh bearing pain for others and being strong enough to keep producing good? How do we know how much of the cost to take and when to even do so? If all the good people die for villains, who's left? What good would any of that do? The answer rests in something they both ponder in those quotes you heard: atonement. Directly as Wolfwood said, or as Vash put it, realizing one's mistakes. The priest was not incorrect in doing what a harsh world demands, and doing so in a way which ever so slowly worked towards a better world. He was incorrect in believing so late that one who was so solid could never be good again, and using that to justify never trying to be better. Think about it like this. Say that humans are inherently good and the world is what creates our flaws. We have the capacity to do evil as well as good. Even if we do many evil things, what if we do an equal amount of good ones to balance them out? And what if every single person did the same thing at the same time? That would return us all to a neutral state, a world without evil, where suddenly good actions would breed good actions, rather than the depressing state of evil coming from evil, wouldn't it? Even if we remove the assumption that we as humans are inherently good, can we see how this would at least lessen the pressures drawing out our worst sides and still make the world better? There are billions of us. Not every single one has to be kind in every single situation. All we need to do is pull our own weight, make our giving equal to our taking. It's a hopeful idea Trigun holds in statements like everyone deserves a future. It's saying that no matter our sins, if we atone properly, we can always regain the value inherent to a human life. If this is the case, if we only need to do as much good as we do evil at the bare minimum, then why does Vash, who gives entirely of himself to no end for others, get to live? While Wolfwood, who did many devilish things but also helped many and was genuinely kind, have to die? Isn't Trigun actually saying that the only option available is to show kindness whatever the situation and cost to oneself, and that anything else is selfish? Well, it very well might be. When you take its direct and preachy statements into consideration, especially from Vash's inspiration Rem, who at one point even sides with a man who is physically abusive to her sons and says things like no one has the right to take the life of another, and then the forgiveness it forces people to show, even to men who viciously beat their daughters, all these things throughout the series, it certainly seems to be exclaiming that we must forgive and forget all sins against us. Combined with how much toll is placed on Vash, this worsens. We don't just have to forgive and forget, it seems to be saying, but we have to do it no matter the cost to us. This is Vash's body. Where Wolfwood most openly bear the cross, Vash instead carries these marks deforming his body, ones which will never go away. They're not heavy, and one would forget about them hidden under clothes, so they seem to be better than the cross, even if they mark one so deeply only for the sake of others. It's almost presenting this self-sacrifice as freeing compared to the alternative weight. Meryl even quite directly says,
So those scars are the price you paid for dealing with your opponents without killing them.
when she sees him like this for the first time. With all of this taken into account, it's hard not to say that Trigun is preaching a tired, old message of tolerance even when towards the intolerant. In a time where we want to give you free healthcare and some people don't deserve rights are somehow taken as equally dangerous viewpoints, this mindset and this brand of centrism Rem showed is legitimately dangerous. Was the fate of the human race worth one drunkard who messed up their plans and beat her sons? Believe people when they tell you who they are. You have no obligation to forgive people when they themselves put in no effort to show they deserve forgiveness. If we forgave every asshole who stole and assaulted and more, then we'd have a bunch of good people suffering so that a select few evil people could live freely. It's giving up the freedom the social contract is supposed to grant us so that they may go outside of it, and that's not right. There is no way that is healthy. So it was hard for me to reconcile that one of my favorite series was saying something I hated. I was ready to point out the flaws in its logic and tear down its message, and I wrote a whole accidental video on coming to terms with problematic aspects of things we love to try and deal with this feeling. It's hard for me to not love this anime, even with its accidentally hilarious eye catch, its janky animation, its direct and preachy statements. It still produces some of the most impactful moments I've ever seen despite all of this, and I genuinely feel its heart was in the right place. It was just a bit naive. So I tried to recontextualize that possibly flawed logic seen in Trigun into an adaptation of its message, which we begin when we spoke about atonement. We'll continue now to see how it's furthered in Vash's suffering. There's another reason why Vash lives and Wolfwood dies. Vash is a plant, an independent version of those biogenerators which support life on no man's land. His feats of what at first appear to be luck and at second appear to be skill are also due to the immense energy and unbreakable form bestowed upon him. He could die like anything else, but he's lived for over 130 years so far, and it hasn't happened yet. His power is terrifyingly destructive. The crumbling of the City of July, which earned him his extreme bounty, despite his loving nature, it is true, he did that. Vash destroyed the entire city. And he did it again with Augusta, which we see in episode 16, Fifth Moon. These were mostly forced by his brother Knives, but it was done with Vash's angel arm, the way all this energy he carries as a plant is expressed. And the result of this destruction, even though it directly killed no one, led to starvation, which led to cruelty, which led to death, which continued the cycle. We see this in episode 6, Lost July, where a plant engineer tries to get revenge on Vash for this fact. At the age of 3, she was orphaned in the chaos that followed July's early death. While the responsibility Vash should truly bear for this is questionable, given it was really down to his brother's actions, and also that the idea of I'm just as bad as the villain for being forced to kill one person is tired and false, he takes it on himself and seeks to atone. This could be seen as why he does anything and everything at a cost to himself to help others. Because like Wolfwood, his sins are that heavy and he must atone. He brought untold harshness to this world, and so he must balance it out with extreme good. So much is expected of him not because it's the standard, but because he holds the power to level an entire city and did. Because he can survive what a normal human can't. Vash doesn't live because he was right. He lives because he's powerful. And Wolfwood doesn't die because he was wrong. He dies because he never atoned. We don't need to forgive every transgression. We don't need to give of ourselves to the point of death. We only need to atone for the evil we marred this earth with, doing our part to one day reach the root. And this is expressed in the final episode titled Under the Sky So Blue, which features Vash's ultimate confrontation with his brother Knives. In previous episodes, we see the difference in their mentality. Seeking to save a butterfly stuck in a spider's web, Vash sets about carefully breaking the web, while Knives jumps in and crushes the spider in one swift blow. Vash is enraged at this, saying he wanted to save both, but Knives says there is no way to. If you save the butterfly, then the spider just starves. One will always have to die. This is what leads him to hate humanity, who he sees as a drain on other life. They're the spiders killing the butterflies. The anime never addresses this point past that. Vash just screams about wanting to save everything, but there's no solution giving. he's just a kid throwing a tantrum. But I think atonement can be the answer. To some degree, yes, we will all be guilty of taking to live. Resources are not as finite as we've been led to believe, and all of humankind could really exist off what we have, but what we have is at the cost of other life on this planet. We must consume life to ourselves live. If we stick to a strict definition of morality, we can say that we will all commit some degree of evil in this. But we can always make up for it. We can always be kind and pay back what we took. We don't have to fall to the idea that we are inherently evil just because life consumes life. I think this is one case where the other way is truly kindness, to make up for that which we can't help anyway. But back in action and ready for the final showdown, Vash is given Wolfwood's Crust Punisher to take on his journey to face the evil brother. After a protracted battle, his former friend's weapon is what saves his life. The disarmed Vash is about to be killed by Knives, who holds all the advantage, when he remembers the Cross Punisher is beneath him. He reaches for it and uses it not to kill Knives, but to wound him and regain control, ultimately in the same position his brother was just in. And here, he decides to spare his foe, determined that even the most evil villain could be rehabilitated, that no one is truly born evil and that the cycle can end. Here, he uses the weight of his sins for good, turning a past mistake that he now carries the weight of into creating a better future. He can't help what's done and gone, but it can motivate a better future. Trigun's atonement is hopeful. It isn't some idea that we must suffer for the evil that we have wrought, but that there is always some way we can balance it out with kindness. To be human is to rise above what is natural. Look at how they got to no man's land, or for us at the cities we live amongst in our world. We escaped most of that harsh natural cycle. To claim we must be evil because of nature ignores how much we've done to grow and change, even if it wasn't all for the better. We showed that we can always right this ship even if the efforts will be intense, that we can escape anything considered natural cruelty. Another reason I feel I'm technically disagreeing with Trigun is how Knives' story ends. Despite having only ever expressed ill intent, Vash takes on the responsibility of saving him. He takes on the atonement for his brother. And I feel that is wrong. That's doing what we said earlier and allowing evil to prosper at the cost of freedom. I think the answer for our own world of when to forgive is complicated, but it definitely isn't that. I don't believe anyone is owed forgiveness, and the idea that we must lets them off easy and places the responsibility to be mature on victims. I don't believe someone who shows no kindness deserves it themselves. But it is also true that if no one forgives and no one is kind, then our world will stay harsh forever. It's true that a lot of the cruelty we respond to things with is because we were hurt, because we witnessed cruelty before. It's hard to say that not everyone deserves kindness because it betrays an idealism rooted so deeply in me. I want to believe all humans are beautiful creatures who can make a beautiful world. But we've seen so far that if not impossible, it's at least nowhere near easy. I must give way to realism. No one is inherently owed kindness without showing some respect for it or showing it themselves first. How do we reconcile these facts and be responsible for making a world better than the wasteland we were born into? Well, although it is only one simple aspect of a much larger answer, atonement is key. How do we decide when to show kindness to cruel and when to forgive? When they show they are worthy of it by making up for past mistakes. When they show that our time being used on them couldn't have been better used on more people with better intent. When they show that the cost we place on ourselves for a better world is and will continue to be repaid by them. When they show there is somehow good within them. I refuse to spend my life suffering so assholes can go free in the hopes that long after I'm gone the world will be better. We do have some responsibility to the future, but that responsibility is not to suffer. I don't know if this is what Trigun meant or not. To be honest, I don't think it is. But we're human beings who interpret the message, and all art depends on our viewing of it. It meant well, however misguided it may have been. So I wanted to show it the same good intent it showed us on how to make a better future. Anyway, that's it for this one. I legitimately did make a whole video on accident to cope with how I was going to make this one. And eventually it led me to just kind of trying to adapt those themes and, working out of the premise that art's a subjective thing. And I think this does work based on Trigun's own logic. I think if we take its message as it seems to show it, this kindness always mentality, it doesn't really work because Vash only survives because he's not human. It's kind of messed up. in that the series was trying to be really badass and cool while also presenting this down-to-earth and kind-hearted message, and there's just a disconnect between having your main character be able to destroy moons and also be the embodiment of that theme. But I could ramble on about that forever, so I will stop myself and just say there's links in the pinned comment, Twitter, that sucks, whatever. Discord where some fans and everyone gathers and have some conversations and new videos get posted and things. And most importantly, Patreon, where the lovely people above me help support me in making completely insane rambling things like this. But thank you to everyone for spending a bit of your time with me here today. And I'll just say thank you for watching, and I hope I'll see you again soon.